It's time to jump into our session today, titled Supporting Diverse Learning Needs. And I'm very excited to introduce to you some of our Allen ISD gurus on all the things. They are truly the experts. We have John Lipscomb. He is an LSSP, licensed school therapist. And we have Kara Janasek. She is our coordinator for dyslexia therapy. And Carrie Lockhart is our coordinator for GT and advanced academics. So I am going to hand this over to them and let them take it away. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you. What we're going to begin with is just talk about some of the various type of diverse learners that we want to share some information with you about. And in particular, we're going to be looking at advanced learners, students with dyslexia, and students with executive functioning difficulties. And Carrie, if you want to talk about advanced learners for a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Ashley, I am going to jump all the way into, I believe it is slide 3. Thank you for the introduction. We'll go ahead and get started talking about who our diverse learners are today. And before we jump into the specifics of characteristics from students from each of these categories, every single one of the kiddos that we're going to talk about today will present these characteristics and traits on a really wide spectrum. That means there's no specific checklists for students with dyslexia, for advanced learners. We have plenty of commonalities between all of our student populations, so it's really important that as a parent you remember, hey, I may see one of these things in my kid but not the other, and that's okay. They share many traits. Generally speaking, our advanced learners, when compared to their peers, exhibit high performance capability. That's in leadership domains, sometimes that's in fine arts domains, sometimes that's in academic domains, and they excel in a specific field. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about the domain specificity of giftedness here in the presentation in a couple slides, and this definition is actually taken from the one that TEA provides us. So when we think about our advanced learners, we're thinking about our kiddos who are outperforming their peers in one or more areas.
All right, and students with dyslexia, oh, you want to go back, sorry. Generally, they tend to struggle to lift words, printed words off of the page to make sense of that. And as a result, often need extra processing time. We will talk about more specifics in just a bit. John, you want to talk about executive functioning?
Yes. So executive functioning is basically the ability of a child or an adolescent to recognize that there's a problem or challenge out in their environment, to basically try to put the pieces together and figure out how they may resolve and solve that problem or handle that task, and then actually carrying through the tasks to complete that activity or manage that problem. So executive functioning can impact the way a student works or goes about group activities in the school setting. Executive functioning can also affect the way a student handles emotional challenges and problems, whether that's frustration or social interaction kind of things. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. And finally, executive functioning also picks up on how well students perceive time and engage in time management practices that can make them successful in the school setting. We'll talk a little bit later about kids with some particular conditions like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder that can cause them significant difficulties with executive functioning. But we see these kind of challenges sort of across the board with all students. There's sort of a spectrum in terms of how they handle and use their skills in the classroom environment.
I'm going to hop really quick. I failed to mention this in the beginning. Parents, if you have questions along the way, please feel free to stick those in the chat and we will address those at the end of the presentation.
When we think about some of the unique needs that our kids have, as I mentioned earlier, many of our student populations have overlap, particularly in some of the brain-based differences that we notice and the resulting potential challenges. I'd like to take this opportunity to familiarize everyone with the term multiple exceptionalities. This means that we have kids who can be both advanced and gifted learners and students who have dyslexia or students who have ADHD. Our students don't exist in silos, and many times they demonstrate a number of the characteristics and have a number of the learning needs that we're going to outline today. And so as we think about some of these differences on this slide and on subsequent slides, remember that we can have kiddos who coexist in both worlds. I think if we can go back, Ashley. Yeah, Kara and John were going to discuss some of the brain-based differences and potential challenges for students in their areas of expertise as well.
Absolutely. So a lot of these unique needs that we're going to discuss with our different student populations are brain-based. And so really their ability to take in information and perceive it is different, often different than their peers. So some potential challenges can be feeling that alienation or feeling that sense of I'm different. And then sometimes we have the masking of skills or abilities where potentially something like dyslexia could mask giftedness, or vice versa. If they're already identified as an advanced learner or gifted learner, sometimes they compensate and the dyslexia is not as quick to rear its head.
And as far as some of the maladaptive coping mechanisms that our students who have executive functioning difficulties can kind of demonstrate in a school setting, what you may see sometimes is that students, and this can even be the case with homework, is have a lot of difficulty getting started on a task and formulating how they're going to go about a task. And so we see a long lag time before beginning things. Sometimes if they're very interested in a task, they'll be hyper engaged and become very focused on things and could do a fairly exceptional job. But at other times, as we'll see, a topic just may not interest them or be perceived as tedious. And what we tend to see there is either task avoidance and tend to shy away from completion of the activity, or a tendency to wait till the very last minute before completion of a task. And so we get rushing through work, we get stress, we get unforced errors and other type of difficulties. So we'll see those type of issues too. Also, students who have executive functioning differences can sometimes, as far as alienation from peers, they'll feel or perceive that their performance and their capability are different from how peers function. And so they'll see themselves sometimes as inferior and sometimes be very sensitive to criticism and other type of things. And we'll talk about ways to work around those issues too. That masking of skills is something we see sometimes where a student will want to conceal their difficulties. And so sometimes they will have demeanors or personalities that can sometimes be silly or joking or those type of things. Or sometimes they'll be the student who pulls back and is slow or reluctant to engage or interact with other peers. And so we see that lack of socialization. And sometimes what students will do is they'll want to conceal their abilities or sometimes conceal their interests because they feel that the students around them aren't going to have a positive reaction to those parts of their skills and those parts of their personalities. So we see potential challenges with these things coming up in an array of situations.
So we've talked about some generalities that span many different student populations. I'm going to spend a little bit of time here focused in on our advanced learners and key things that as parents we can help do at home with our kids. And we'll just start with some things that our gifted kids just need us to understand. The first of those is asynchronous development. That means, like we mentioned on the previous slide, our brains develop a little bit differently. So sometimes the neural connections in a gifted child's brain are just firing 1,000 miles an hour. And one side of the brain is going to connect with the other side of the brain in a way that their peers may not experience yet. So developmentally, in terms of cognition, they are able to, going back to our definition, outperform their same age peers in terms of thinking. Sometimes it's calculation, sometimes it's just out of the box creativity, depending on the student's areas of giftedness. So they can be at one level cognitively, but then there's still 5. So they don't have the fine motor skills maybe to write down that excellent story they just thought of. And that's really frustrating. Imagine that your mind works 1,000 miles an hour and your body can't keep up. That's an example of asynchronous development. Imagine, like John mentioned, we kind of alienate from peers sometimes when they don't think like us or have the same interests. If I'm 7 and all I want to talk about are black holes, but everybody around me is really disinterested and I kind of feel like, oh, I'm bringing the conversation to a screeching halt here. That's really frustrating because maybe they're not picking up on some of those developmentally appropriate social cues. So when our mind and our social skills and our bodies work at different levels, that means we're developing in an asynchronous way. So it's important as parents, when we have those good conversations when our kids come home, what did you learn? Oh, my teacher introduced this unit on dinosaurs and we're really doing a deep dive. And then they have a meltdown because they can't tie their shoes. And we're left going, oh my goodness, where was the kid I was talking to just a few minutes ago? They're still there, but they're still little. So we really have to think about that. And as a parent, that takes some pivoting in the moment. But please remember that where your child is and what they can articulate in terms of their thinking doesn't always keep up with their feelings or their physical actions. Another thing that our kiddos need us to remember is that giftedness is domain specific. What does that mean? So let's think about what we do in our own jobs. Many of us have very nuanced roles in what we do for a living. I don't do the same thing that John does. If I walked a mile in his shoes for a day, I'd probably be really confused. And the same with Kara. My area of expertise, what I do here every day, is with our gifted and advanced learners. Your kids' minds work the same way. Maybe they are math whizzes, but they really, really struggle to read and write. And that's okay. We don't need our kids to be gifted at everything. We don't do jobs that are wide and encompassing. Yes, we cover many tasks. Yes, we have many areas that we can speak to, but just think about their little minds like we think about what we do every day. We have different areas of focus. They have different areas of focus, and it's really important as parents that we meet them where they are in each of those areas. So their giftedness many, many times is going to be specific to a domain such as, if it's academics, maybe it's math, maybe it's science, if it's fine arts, maybe it's performing, maybe it's not visual art. So we really have to think and hone in where are our students' areas of giftedness and how do we meet them where they are, both within and outside of those areas. The other thing that they need for us to remember is they've got to have a balance between their academic and social development. It's really exciting to see that you have a precocious child. Maybe let's say they're just writing. They've published books by the time they are in fourth grade, and that's great. Like we want to funnel all of our efforts and all of our extra time into growing that giftedness. And your kids may take it and run with it because it feels good to be really good at something and practice something that you're interested in. They need that balance with their peers, and we're going to talk in just a minute about who those peers can be, so they can hone those social skills. We talked about asynchronous development. Part of meeting them where they are is helping them to hone those social and emotional skills through interactions with others and not a blind focus in an area of expertise or just continual focus on academics. You have to have a good balance. I mentioned twice exceptionalities, so sometimes it's easy to get caught up with one and ignore the other. My child was just identified gifted, but golly, they're several grade levels behind. They can't read. They have dyslexia. What do I do? And we focus on one and not so much on the other. This is a really, really difficult balance to strike. But we'll talk more in these slides about leveraging some strengths-based approaches to help kiddos bridge some of their areas where they may need some additional help, where they may have one exceptionality with another. So those are things that our students really need for us to remember as we parent them and as we kind of walk through the school journey together. So when we look at developing those kiddos academically, we need a match between their skills and learning opportunities. This includes our extracurriculars outside of school. Are we too focused? Do we have 3 math after school camps a week? Is that really a just right match, or is that an inappropriate press? Right? So let's ask ourselves, let's talk to our kids, let's make them a part of that conversation. A just right press has the kids progressing and moving forward, but not in a way where they come home and they're stressed out. I can't talk at the dinner table because I've just had such a long day. Think about you coming home after a long, stressful day. We don't want to create that for our kiddos every single day because they've got so much going on. We need to find the content that's right for them. Maybe they don't need that dramatic acceleration that those 3 after-school math camps provides. Maybe they're okay with where they are, and we just go in and we have deeper discussions about numbers. How quick are we moving? What are we learning? Just right means that your child can talk about it in a way that they're still passionate, they're still excited, and they're still thriving and focused at school, and they're not just pulled razor thin. Socially, we know that when we learn about how to interact with the folks around us, it's situated in certain contexts, right? The way you act at work is not the way you act at home, and that's okay. Sometimes our gifted students, this goes back to the asynchronous development, are a little bit behind in these areas. We have to practice. Maybe something that is, when you talk ad nauseum about black holes at school, man, other kids don't like that. So we've got to talk about what are some expected behaviors from our peers when we do that, and how do we combat that if we want to not change who we are, but fit in and have conversations where everybody has an opportunity to contribute equally. That takes practice. That takes practice for adults. So this is an ongoing thing. But remember, when you're working with your kids, what is the social context that we're talking about? Are we talking about church? Are we talking about school? Are we talking about home? Are we talking about the playground? So practice in those areas. I've mentioned finding like-minded peers. That means we have kids who think like us, and that means maybe working with other gifted students. seeking out maybe kids in your child's AIM class from school. Maybe that means if they do have an after-school enrichment activity, can we have some play dates with those kids that think the same way, that are outside of the academic context, that give them time to practice some of those social skills? I would suggest striking a good balance between kiddos whose minds work like your students and maybe kids whose minds don't, because that's going to give them the opportunity to practice those social developmental skills. Finally, in terms of social development, we want to help our kids make connections between their learning, what they're passionate about, what their interests are, and their social and cultural identities. So again, going back to when we get together in the neighborhood, when we get together at church, when we get together at our cultural centers, how can we celebrate the learning and the gifts that's going on in a way that's appropriate for that particular context? And that's going to help your kid have a really global view of their skills and abilities. Finally, the emotional piece in helping your gifted child thrive is just naming, being very explicit with emotions. And this is good for all kids. This is not unique to gifted kids. When we have big feelings and we struggle to name them, let's take a break, let's be explicit, and let's say, what does our body feel like? Like I have such an inflated sense of justice. Oh, what happened in school today wasn't fair. I can't believe it. I can't believe the teacher XYZ. And you're just so mad. You come home and you start kicking and punching. All right, maybe those are not, or you do that at school. That's not adaptive behavior. What we can do is we can teach our kids when we have those big feelings, and many times our gifted kids do, because they do sense, they have a heightened sense of justice. They have a heightened awareness of what they perceive to be fair. And so particularly our smaller kids, teaching them like, oh, hey, when our stomach drops and when we feel our heart race, like we're kind of scared, those feelings that we have, that can also mean we're mad. Let's take a second. We are mad. What do we do when we're mad? And that takes so much practice. I know that John will talk a lot about behavior and emotional regulation, but golly, that takes practice. That takes practice for adults. But teaching them to name and manage those emotions rather than living with them in the moment is very helpful for our gifted kiddos. We also want to help them cultivate empathy. So let's think about how other people might feel in this situation and come up with some key peers and adults where they can have meaningful relationships and feel like that's a trusted person in their life where they can express their thoughts and emotions without fear of negative consequence or judgment. So these are just some tips to help your gifted child thrive. Again, you may use some of these, you may not. You may find other skills, but this is a great place to start with your advanced learners.
All right, we'll go to the next slide. Great. Okay. Well, before we dive into dyslexia, we did talk about it was a brain-based learning difference. So I kind of want to talk about just really briefly what the reading process looks like in the brain and try to explain it in a way that you can understand. But what's really interesting, y'all, is that our human brains were actually not designed to read. And that was something that was developed over time. And so as a result, learning to read is truly one of the hardest tasks that we have as humans. And so just kind of keep that in the back of your mind as you may have one of your children that's, struggling with that process. But essentially, what is happening when we learn how to read is that we have three main parts of the brain that are involved in that. And first, what we do is match the symbols, the printed squiggles on the page to sounds, kind of in the back part of our brain. And then we put those sounds together to make an identifiable word, one that we recognize. And then finally, in a different part of the brain, we attach that word to the meaning of said word to then make sense of what we're reading. So for good readers, all of these processes work together and they're happening simultaneously. The more we read, the more automatic that process becomes. So when we talk about dyslexia, it is a brain-based learning difference, and dyslexia results in less efficient reading oftentimes, because the parts of the brain that would typically help a person recognize familiar words or sound out unfamiliar words, they aren't activated as much. They're not firing up. So instead, somebody with dyslexia, they might over-rely on the part of the brain that processes oral language. This is kind of the front part of our brain. And so while a typical reader will remember what an unfamiliar word looks like after they've seen it a few times, they've kind of mapped it after a bit, sometimes it might not become familiar to somebody with dyslexia. So that connection essentially between the sound of the word and the letter pattern and the meaning is not made, or it takes a lot more effort and work to do. And so as a result, our students with dyslexia, they have to learn other ways to recognize words and compensate for this difficulty. And so that is why dyslexia therapy is such an amazing tool and support for our students with dyslexia, because we can actually remediate and rewire the brain through dyslexia therapy. And so although it can be remediated, dyslexia will persist across a lifespan. So we're able to make new brain connections. However, let's say we have worked really hard all day long, done a lot of reading, done a lot of processing information. We get home and our brains are tired. And so they might slip up and mix some words around or need some additional time. And that's where those accommodations and just being mindful that the brain is, even though we've done some great remediation, it's still, dyslexia will persist over that lifespan. All right, let's go to the next slide. So some common characteristics of dyslexia that, our teachers may observe in the classroom setting, or you as parents may observe at home when you're working with your child. Potentially some difficulty reading words in isolation. So sometimes their ability to recognize high frequency common words like the, from, for, those types of words that often don't follow our rules and our traditional patterns in English. Those are the ones you're like, oh my gosh, you just saw that word. Why? It's frustrating, right? They have not had the opportunity to map the sounds onto the letters on the page. They often have difficulty decoding or breaking words apart that are unfamiliar to them. So you may see them use the first couple letters, and then we're going to make a guess, especially when we have pictures and other clues on the page. Our students with dyslexia are often very gifted at making some inferences and trying to figure out exactly what's going on, and they're sometimes really close. They're in the ballpark. And so that you're like, wow, it's amazing. With as many errors as we made while we read, we still kind of have a sense of what's going on. So some students with dyslexia often have difficulty reading out loud. Maybe it's just really slow. It's laborious. Maybe they have memorized enough words to where it looks like we're okay, but we're reading without expression. We're not paying attention to punctuation. We're just plowing right through, right? So those might be some things that you notice. And then also difficulty spelling, especially when writing in context, meaning in paragraphs or something like that. So they might know how to spell the word catch just by itself. But when you think about what we have to do when we spell, it's such a complicated task. You're essentially thinking of that word, and then you have to break it apart, unblend it, and then attach the sound that you're hearing to the letters that represent that sound. And so that is can be a challenge for our students with dyslexia. So go ahead and go to the next one. Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. So some additional concerns, sometimes we call them secondary characteristics and consequences. Difficulty with aspects of reading comprehension. So think about it. If your brain is having to use so much energy to figure out what the words say, right, and how to pronounce them, how to read them accurately, it can impact your ability to gain meaning from the text because you don't have as much mental energy left to to do the thinking, which is the whole point of reading, right, is to gain meaning from what we're doing. And so that is why accommodations can really be a game changer for our students that are identified with dyslexia. And things like text-to-speech, audiobooks, oral administration, when the focus of the activity is not for them to decode and actually read the words themselves, but if it's more, let's make meaning from this piece of text we're learning about in science. If that's read aloud, they can then focus on the meaning and do the thinking, the heavy lifting with that. Another concern that we sometimes see when we think about our students with dyslexia, it's hard. It is hard to read, right? And it takes a lot of energy. So I might avoid being with my head stuck in a book all the time because it's difficult. And so as a result, sometimes our students with dyslexia have limited growth in vocabulary and background knowledge simply because of exposure to a wide variety of texts. And so that is crucial for reading comprehension. We're reading a passage for Star that is about black holes. Well, if I don't have that knowledge, or background knowledge, some of that subject matter vocabulary is really going to be difficult for me, right? So opportunities, it's so important to try to build the conversations and to learn together as families and see what we're interested in, and then read books, listen to audio books, podcasts, things like that to build kind of a wide knowledge of various topics. And then we also have difficulties sometimes with aspects of written language. So getting their thoughts from here to here, whether it be writing them down or typing. And so utilizing speech to text kind of as a brain dump is a great way to, okay, let me just get my thoughts down, because we might be so focused on, I don't know how to spell that word, so I'm just going to say big instead of enormous when I could have this great vocabulary, but I struggle to write that word, right? So the opportunity to practice utilizing Siri and speech to text can really, really help level the playing field and allow students with dyslexia the opportunity to truly show what they know. All right, next slide. So wanted to just touch on real quickly some supports at home. So one of the best things that you guys can do is read together and really take turns with parents modeling what fluent reading looks like. Kind of just find a balance and be purposeful. So if they're needing to read to practice reading a book on their level, that's one thing, right? And let's do that, but then let's take some breaks, right? But if we want to give them the opportunity to really work on those reading skills and the comprehension and making connections, and they often can comprehend books on a higher level than what they are physically able to read themselves. And so that's where reading Harry Potter together, a series, whatever you'd like to do at home can really, really be a game changer. Using audiobooks to pair listening with that printed text. So we kind of talk about it like reading with our ears. It's another way to read, guys. And so when they're doing that, it's important that they can follow along with the text. That's a great way for them to build vocabulary. And they can see that word and be like, oh, that's what that says. And so if you're doing that for, if they can see the words, that really makes that extra connection, makes that learning multisensory. If we're listening to an audiobook for pleasure, it's not imperative that we can see the words, but it's definitely a skill that we have to learn and kind of train and build that stamina. So starting in small doses, like we're going to listen for 5 minutes and then we're going to, hey, what did we hear? What did you notice? Talking about the text, asking questions. Hey, what do you think is going to happen next? Ooh, I wonder why. Those types of conversations and things that we notice as learners. Vocabulary, it's a great opportunity to build that. Some of these are, guys, more general things. Routines are so important. We'll probably dive into this a lot more. But for our kiddos with dyslexia, the day is stressful. And so as much as we can have routines and a structure and a schedule, they really, that will help them anchor kind of their learning. Really celebrate that effort and not perfection. They learn so much, and especially when they're in dyslexia therapy, we really work on rewiring that. So celebrating those efforts. God, you worked really hard on this. Thank you so much. And then seeing that growth over time. Organizational apps and techniques can be so helpful for all of our students, ourselves included, right? So really responding well to color, coding things, and then seeing things visually so they can kind of help prioritize and support that. In terms of conversations at home with your kiddos, really try to think about dyslexia as a difference, not a deficit. There are certain things that are hard and difficult about dyslexia, and so we want to acknowledge that, and there's power for our students in realizing and owning, hey, my brain works differently, but you know what? Here's all the things I'm able to do. And by, having the direct intervention and things like that, you're able to overcome those challenges and learn how to use those. So really try to encourage the self advocacy and help them practice kind of explaining, here's what helps me learn. It helps me when I can see the text and I can hear you as the teacher or my coach explaining the play to me, but I also can see it. And then like when I get up and do it and practice it. So thinking through avenues and other places where our students are interacting with other people that are trying to teach them something, right? And then, of course, we want to maximize the strengths and creativity, problem solving, kind of out of the box thinking, often are characteristics of people with dyslexia. So really trying to encourage them to think about themselves as really bright intellectual people. One of the things we do in our dyslexia therapy groups is we talk a lot about people in the real world that have dyslexia and how they can, overcome some of those difficulties, but capitalize on the things that their brains allow them to do to help them be successful.
All right, and I'm just going to share with you some information about. It was a question that was brought up by some of y'all's participants. whenever y'all sent us questions or information ahead of time about what might be of interest to you, there were a number of questions that dealt with the issue of I see very short attention span in my child, and I'm concerned about what that might mean for their learning. Or my child is unable to complete a relatively simple task that I would expect them to be able to accomplish, and I'm worried about that. What can I do about that? What are some of the next steps? And so we wanted to include in this information things about executive functioning and about the potential for the development of ADHD. ADHD is a condition that affects the frontal cortex, or the front part of a child's brain. It just means that there are some delays and differences in how that part of the brain is developing. And that comes out as just some skills that we see, how they'll present from day to day. So, for example, a child who might show some characteristics of potential ADHD when they're young are a child who has the ability to play or engage with preferred activities for a long period of time. But when it's time to transition to other activities, or it's time to switch, or we need to leave the playground or leave the play date and go somewhere else, that transition cues an excessive reaction, anger, frustration, those type of things. When it's time for kids like this, when they're young, to sit down and read with a parent, or to sit down at dinner time, they might have trouble just staying in one place, show a tendency toward overactivity level with those kind of things. Also, these young kids may tend to show some issues with just how they handle their belongings and everything. They may have just messiness and things all over their rooms or all over the house, because that's where they engage with things, and then we're done, they walk away from those kind of things. So when we see a young child with kind of that set of characteristics, we begin to wonder how some of their traits and characteristics are going to transition into the school setting. What we tend to see by the time these kids get into a school environment, they have a tendency, more so than others, to do things like lose things, lose their coats, lose their belongings, maybe even lose a favorite toy. They may forget their folder at school. They may forget a lunchbox or water bottle at school. Just a general tendency to have trouble just keeping track and dealing with things. Transitions may still be difficult. So kids with potential ADHD characteristics can get very engaged by things that they are interested in. But when it's time to leave that activity and shift over to something else, they may have a lot of difficulty, frustration, engage in yelling or frustration or other kind of things when we see that happening. They may have a short attention span for those kind of activities that they perceive as tedious or boring. Now, this is the kind of kid who might have the ability to do a favorite activity like Legos or video games, or read or research a favorite topic even, and everything, for long periods of time. But if we're asking them to complete a simple assignment from school, or if we're asking them to do something simple like, can you go clean your room up before dinner time? Or if we're asking them to sit down at dinner time and join in with the family and everything, they may have a lot of difficulty with those kind of things. So when we start seeing that kind of mix of what I call an interest-based nervous system, those things that engage them, they're novel, they involve competition, those kind of things. But the child doesn't necessarily have the ability to do what neurotypical kids can do, which is just attend to things that are introduced by parents, or attend to things that are introduced by teachers. They're not able to focus and complete things when those are introduced. That kind of presents an area where we need to be aware, and we need to start looking more closely at what the child's needs might be. Kids with ADHD characteristics also show what I call the emotional hyperarousal. What this is just a tendency for these kind of kids to report, I'm always feeling tense, or I just have trouble relaxing. So they always kind of seem on the edge. They kind of seem, if we're sitting down to do something like a family movie or a family activity or game or something like that, they're at the first opportunity, these are the kids who want to get up and walk away, or they want to leave, or they just really struggle to engage in those kind of activities. Even when it's time to go to sleep at night, they may have a great deal of difficulty, and they may have shown this even from early childhood, turning their body and their brain off and getting ready to go to sleep. So there's just this elevated kind of engagement or tenseness always going on. We want to be aware that those kids kind of have some different needs and need some different kind of support. The other type of thing that we tend to look at if we're maybe looking at potential ADHD is these kids have what's called rejection sensitivity. So if we're criticizing or giving them some constructive criticism or guidance on what they need to be doing, or sometimes if we or teachers or other kids or even sometimes teasing them, anything that kind of introduces or reminds that kid that they do have kind of an inbuilt sense of frustration with activities or getting things done or following the program and everything can be a significant difficulty for these kids. And whenever they feel rejected or overly criticized, maybe they'll respond with anger or even a flash of rage. And if they don't show that tendency, maybe their tendency is to try to walk away or avoid activities. These are the kind of kids who maybe will introduce sports or soccer or other kind of activities to them, but they'll just say, no, I don't like that. I don't want to do that. I'd rather go play or do my preferred activities. And they have trouble engaging in those things just because connecting with that experience takes so much energy for them. Those are three kind of characteristics that if you're seeing this in your kids, it's time to kind of do some further research. And Ashley, if you could go to the next slide. The next step, if you have kind of concerns about your child's attention span or ability to cope or ability to transition and those type of things, is kind of to do some of your own research. I've put two very comprehensive, what I think are very sound, great websites for you to do kind of some of your own research on. Both of these websites have a list of symptoms or characteristics of ADHD. They also kind of provide individual parent family stories. So you can compare your experience as a parent or your child's experience to some others and everything and figure out, are they showing difficulty with ADHD? Do I need to take some next steps? So you'll see the details on this slide. I really, by the way, like the website attitudemag.com because it's an advocacy website for kids with ADHD or even executive functioning difficulties. It doesn't have to be ADHD, but it gives you a tremendous number of ideas and strategies and ways to kind of help your kid and advocate for your kid. All right, Ashleen, can you go to the next page? And I'm going to take a moment because I need to wake up the lights in this room. All right. So the next step is the ADHD diagnosis process. I wanted y'all to provide y'all some information about what goes into identifying a child with ADHD. Is it just characteristics or is it actually ADHD that's presenting? The first step you're going to want to do if you have concerns like this is just collaborate and talk and spend time with your classroom teacher because they're working directly with your student. If other folks are working in the school with your student and everything, get information from them, find out strategies, ideas, get their point of view on things. Also, the school counselor is somebody who sometimes provides supports for our students as far as social skill supports, as far as other kind of academic supports and community resources and other kind of things. a very useful person to be talking to and spending time with. And then finally, the assistant principal at your campus is somebody who can provide additional information about all these kind of concerns. In parallel with getting information, though, from school personnel, as far as if you have concerns about ADHD, the first step as parents or family that you can do is talk with your primary care physician or your physician's assistant or your nurse and express your concerns. Tell them what you see, tell them what your teachers are reporting the child showing at school, and have that part of the conversation. Your primary care provider may actually recommend that you get more diagnostic information that would involve testing, visiting a specialist, those type of things. Psychologists and psychiatrists are folks who can do that type of identification outside the school. Some families consider folks like neurologists or other type of things, but there's different people you can talk to based on the guidance you get from your primary care provider. And also, there are many families who engage in counseling or family counseling if they have difficulty or concerns about their child's functioning. Counselors are a great source of ideas and interventions, but they're not typically the folks who are involved in the actual diagnosis of a condition. So I just wanted to let y'all know who the players were in terms of looking at the next step for ADHD. And Ashley, the next slide, please. Let's see, other way. There we go. Okay. And the last thing I wanted to share with you is just some information about engaging with your child who has executive functioning or frustration problems or even possible ADHD. These are 3 phrases you can use in interacting with your child when they're showing frustration, when they're showing anger, or when they're showing anxiety, crying, other kind of high-level emotions and everything. And you'll see each of these phrases is kind of tied to our children don't like to feel doubted. They want it validated that their frustration experiences or anxiety experiences are really happening. And so it's important that they hear from us the message that I believe you're having difficulty. I believe this is a trouble for you. Let's try to talk more about it. If you get those times where you're actually kind of in a power struggle, you're having difficulty getting your child to do homework or other type of things, which can be stressful for these kids, and their emotions and other type of things may really be kind of even on the verge of out of control or just at least very frustrating. The message you want to give literally in these words is, let's figure this out together. You want to say, I want to give you a chance to give me what your difficulty is and how you think it can help. And I'll give you how I think it can help. And we'll figure this out together. Now, our high achieving kids and our kids who have higher reasoning abilities and everything are going to be good at this as long as they feel emotionally supported. And you can kind of read more information about that in this slide and get more information and kind of take those steps. The big thing is you want to actually convey sometimes with your kids, hey, I'm listening. Just tell me what's going on. This would be if you see them frustrated or disengaged or crying, or even just talking about not wanting to go to school the next day because of something that went on. And you can read more about it in that handout, but that just gives you some idea, some language, so that you're kind of collaborating, working with your child through some of these frustrations and difficulties and helping them and helping you kind of take the next step towards solving problems.
So here in these final slides, we're going to touch on some common roadblocks and support strategies, and we have talked through a number of these in the presentation thus far. There's been a big focus on executive functioning skills, and we do see that across the board with many, many, many of our kiddos. Executive functioning skills are the skills to get through the day socially, emotionally, and organizationally. We use them as adults. Your kids are building them and developing them as students, and they have to exercise and practice them every day. For our advanced learners, we need to remember that asynchronous development and ask what's developmentally appropriate, right? Maybe we're in an advanced math class, but they can't for the life of them organize notes or papers, or stuff just doesn't come home. Ask yourself, what's developmentally appropriate for my child? They're 11. Let's remember that they can work like they're 15 or 16, but really they're 11. We can point out areas where our kids need extra support, but then again, we can look at the areas of strength and leverage those. So for example, let's take that kid in that math class that's highly, highly disorganized. Can we come up with a way to numerate our notes? Can we come up with an organizational system that makes sense to me? So I'm using my strengths to shore up some of those areas in terms of executive functioning where I need that additional help. As adults, we face these all the time. We roll those executive functioning challenges into how we interact with one another and in our roles every single day. Model that for your kids at home. You know, you've come at me with homework, your brother's got a project that was due, and now I've got to go buy supplies, and I forgot to get groceries for dinner, and now I got to do an Amazon return. Like we're processing all of that. It's really, really hard. Say out loud, I can't do all of these things right now. Here are the most important things, and let's talk through them, and this can wait until tomorrow. Oh, I can ask for help with this. Model chunking those tasks, asking for help, and showing them how your mind works so that they can then pick up on those cues and do much the same.
All right. And what we want our kids and our students to be able to do is just develop some skills that are going to help them through these daily challenges and problems, and persist in the activities and the learning that they need to do and really want to do. So we've shared on this slide some information about, we know that multisensory learning opportunities, tasks broken down into smaller parts, providing opportunity for movements and breaks are important strategies that teachers use in the classroom to help their students get work accomplished. We can use those same kind of strategies when we're having our kids work on activities at home or when they're doing activities with coaches and other kind of folks. And we listed some of those strategies for you. Also, on this slide, you'll see if you have those concerns about ADHD, how to help your kids with ADHD deal with that feeling that something is boring or that it may be too hard for them. And it's okay to introduce to these kids that some activities that you're going to do during school are just boring, but also at the same time, they're kind of important. The example I gave is every doctor who we rely on and depend on and everything had to spend endless number of hours back in medical school or before learning the micro parts of anatomy. We want to give examples of like that too. If you're interested in pursuing these things that you want to do, sometimes we have to deal with things that are boring, and it's okay. It's just boring, but we have to get through it. Got to use our strategies. Got to break things down into smaller parts. Got to use movement, got to use some other kind of things. And this slide kind of introduces some different strategies that'll help out in that area. Ashley, you can go ahead.
I'm just going to say really quick, that was amazing. That was so good. I felt like there were so many pieces of the things that you guys said that really like weave in so well with mindful parenting practices that we had last week. Christy, do you agree?
Absolutely.
There were so many things that you guys said about really modeling the behaviors and kind of taking a step back and be calm with your response. Like, it's hard. Parenting is so hard. But apparently we are not too old to thicken our prefrontal cortex, even when we're parents. So if we just pause more, it will thicken and we will get better with our responses. So there's hope for us all. We have several questions. Christy, you want to start with? Yeah, the first one. So she's talking about working on sight words, and her daughter cannot remember the word the. And so she likes cheer. So she made it into a cheer for her so she could say out each of the letters. And she said she remembered it for the rest of the book, but doesn't know if she'll remember it tomorrow. And it's just a constant battle. She also said that she struggles with the letter B and the letter D, and she's tried so many tricks, and she feels like they work for identifying the letter on its own, but when reading, she can't remember if it's the letter B or the letter D.
Great questions. The suggestion about incorporating like body movements and multisensory learning is a great idea, and really will help to build those repetitions. Sometimes our students with dyslexia can take anywhere from 500 to 1,500 repetitions of something before it's really in their long-term memory, which, I mean, it varies, you know. So the word like it's a great opportunity to take a look at, okay, what do we see on the page? Like, what parts do we know? Can we attach a sound to? Well, we know that TH together makes the sound, and thinking through those. The words that you were talking about, those sight words, often a lot of them are irregular. We call them rule breakers. But I love the idea of THE, like whatever if she can incorporate one of her strengths and use the body to help remember, that's a really great suggestion. And it's going to take time and doing some flashcards. Those are the kinds of words, if they're in dyslexia therapy, that we practice on a regular basis, because those words are so common in English text. In terms of the B and D, really quickly, there's so many things out there to try, and what works for one student might not for another one. But something that's helpful when you think about the letter B, when you start and make the sound B, your lips are actually closed and flat. So think about, like, you see the line of the B first, right? So your lips are closed and they puff open to make the B sound, versus the D sound, your mouth is open. So it's almost like the circle of the D that you see first when you read from left to right. Sorry if my hands are going the wrong direction. So that's just something to think about, something we incorporate in our dyslexia therapy, what their mouth is doing when they make that sound.
Thank you. Okay, somebody else asked if there's support for ADHD kids from school.
Yes. So, well, there goes my light again. All right. So, yes, there's two levels of support for kids with ADHD in the school setting. One of them right now is called Section 504, and those are for students that just need accommodations in the classroom with the pace at which we introduce material, or how we introduce material, or maybe they need some extra time on tests or other kind of activities. So Section 504 is really great at providing those important accommodations that kids with ADHD really benefit from. Now, for students who need more substantial intervention, this is typically after maybe other strategies have been attempted for a worthy amount of time before we move to that next step. Special education support is potentially available to students with ADHD. The best thing to do if you have questions about those two levels of support and what can we start doing, start having that conversation with your classroom teachers and the other daily providers. Maybe open a conversation with the school counselor about this issue, maybe in tandem with your classroom teacher. And then as a next step, again, probably with the collaboration of your classroom teacher and everything, consider bringing in that assistant principal who has the ability to access additional resources. But those are the steps I would encourage you to look at first.
Perfect. And then another question, how can we help our kids identify their feelings and express accordingly?
Well, so just one thing I'll throw in. I'm really a huge fan of anything that is involving visuals. If you're getting your child to think about what goes along with anger, what goes along with happiness, what goes along with sadness and everything. Find ways to incorporate visual kind of things in there. People making facial expressions, drawing pictures of people with different facial expressions, and then maybe attaching experiences, writing out on paper and everything. I was sad because my friend moved away. I got angry because my teacher got mad at me for something I didn't do, et cetera, et cetera. But get those concepts of what a feeling kind of looks like, and then start attaching what experiences go along with that feeling. And that sort of starts building it at the first stage.
And I think there's also a body feeling component to that as well. I really like referencing the work of Dr. Christine Fonseca, who works with gifted kids, but really this is good for many, many students. If you have kids that struggle with articulating complex emotions, give them something that they recognize. Like, one of my favorite examples is if you have a kid who is scared or mad but loves to play video games, but when something happens in a video game and you've lost, like it's all over, like I mentioned earlier, your stomach drops, you get kind of sweaty, you might ball up your fists. We're frustrated then, we're mad. And if we have those same feelings in the classroom when something doesn't go our way, okay, now I've taken a recognizable thing that I know how to recover from, like playing a video game, and I can then translate it into, like what John is saying, this is anger. Why am I mad? What do I recognize here? So teaching them to be in tune with their body. If they're older, am I nervous? Am I sweating? Am I shaking? Is my voice a little wavering a little bit? Just really telling them how to pick up on their physical cues, I think is really important in helping to name those emotions as well.
Okay, next question. Is 504 the same as IDEA? IDEA? And then what is an IEP?
So there are two different levels of support. 504 is an excellent starting point for providing kind of accommodations and strategies that teachers and others are going to use in the classroom to help a learner with ADHD or other conditions sort of be more successful. The things IDEA and IEP sort of go together. IDEA is the government legislation that provides specialized services for kids with handicapping conditions, meaning the level and severity of the problems or difficulties they're presenting tend to be more severe, more daily, more intense. And for students who demonstrate that level of need, they have an evaluation that is typically done kind of in the school system, but also with parent participation and sometimes the involvement of outside providers like primary care physicians. And then if we find a need for it, we produce an IEP. And that's a plan that sort of addresses the specific, most significant difficulties the child's presenting with. So we're dealing with those problems with some extra supports.
Okay, the next question. We are currently in a 504 program for my fourth grader for his ADHD, but I'm very worried he may be struggling with dyslexia. He reads pretty well, but the reading comprehension is constantly difficult and grades are low. I went through trying to get approved for just the testing through the school and was denied. They said his testing scores from the original 504 testing were right below what would be considered middle of the road, and it wouldn't make sense to retest. How can I navigate this and advocate for my kids so we can get through the school, help him get through school? It seems unfair that he's shown some of the dyslexia signs and is struggling, but is not in the bottom 10%. We can't get that.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the things I would say in response to this is when you do have a student that's identified with ADHD, sometimes those struggles can affect reading comprehension, right? So their ability to attend to what they are trying to read. Oh, I just reread that like 3 or 4 times. And even just paying attention to the plot and the structure and things like that. So the symptoms can look really similar. What I would really have you kind of pay attention to and have a conversation with your child's teacher is when you listen to them read aloud, and when they're focused on that and reading aloud to you, are they making kind of errors where they are not attaching the right sounds to words? They're mispronouncing them. They're skipping lines, those types of things, or if it's really they're having to sound out every letter. Those are some of the things that we tend to see more for dyslexia, but the characteristics can really be similar, and ADHD can affect students where it could potentially look like dyslexia. I would say at 4th grade, that's when, the content is really starting to become more rigorous, and, we're not working on learning to read as much as we're using reading and text to learn about, content in different subject areas. So you definitely, as things become more rigorous, talk to the teacher and see if they're noticing those same types of difficulties. And then, individual supports that they can work on in interventions in class. And there's obviously the opportunity to have an evaluation, further down the line as well.
Okay. Well, guys, thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you to all of our Raising Eagle friends who made it out and listened to this session today.